Hello, everybody. Aguarde. Hello. Hello, who? Miguel.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Do we have the gallery or not? Or because I have just the welcome, but I don't see anybody. But maybe it's not important.
I am Rilus Kinseng from Indonesia. Thank you.
Can we see the participant or not?
Yes, of course.
Hi, everyone.
Lorenzo from France, Geneva.
Yes, hi, Lorenzo. In a few minutes, we will start. So then the participant will turn on their camera, so you will be able to see them. Sure. We're about to start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to understand how it was going on. Thank you. Who's speaking?
Yes, welcome. Gabriel from RIPES.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. We're about to start.
Hello.
Could we?
Hello.
Hello.
It's lovely to see all of the faces. My name is Judith Hitchman, and I'm president of Urgency, which is the Global Community Supported Agriculture Network, and also a board member of RIPES Intercontinental. So before we really get going, could I ask everybody to please turn off their video, apart from the speakers, because there's a question of bandwidth, and we won't be able to have a good webinar if everybody is online with their microphone open and their video open. So we really need to turn off your microphones. I can see. Apologies about this. I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn off a telephone that isn't turning off. Apologies about that. So we need to keep our microphones closed and only the speakers' videos on. So I'd like to start by welcoming everybody to this first RIPES Intercontinental special series of webinars. Sorry, I'm seeing some video cameras still on. I think it's Doris. Could you maybe please turn off your microphone and your video? Thank you. The idea is to share by crossing our impressions between different continents and in different languages, not just what we are experiencing today, but also what the perspectives are, because after this crisis is over, we can't go back to any normal business as usual. And social solidarity economy is one of the key levers for moving forward. Sorry, I think that there are still some microphones on. Thank you. We can't go back to business as usual, so we're going to try and initiate a certain number of conversations between our participants around the world in a series of different webinars. Today is the first, and I would like to welcome everybody because this is a really critical moment in terms of the history of our planet. but it's also a possibility for us to analyze and look forward and see how we can collectively, through social solidarity economy, move forward to a different world with different solutions and look at the beacons of hope that are appearing at grassroots level and see how they can then be scaled up at global level. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the speakers today. Maybe you can turn on your videos. First of all, there is Dr. Denison Jayasuriya, who is a very well-known figure to anybody, I think, in Asia. Denison is also a board member of REPES, and he is going to hold a first conversation with Jason Nardi, who is one of the current REPES coordinators based in Europe, in Italy, which is really one of the hot spots. And he is in fact in the north of Italy, so he will be able to tell us a little about that. We will then go on to our guest speaker, who is Eri Trinarini, and she is also a member of ASEC. And Eri is going to be our guest speaker and introduce us to Wayudi, who is a grassroots activist, and he will tell us about his experiences, hopefully. So Denison and Jason, are you there?
Yes, we are here, Judith.
Yes, hello. Hi, everybody.
Okay, so this is not so much a formal presentation between the two of you, but more of a conversation. So if we can look at this first from a macro perspective and sort of step back a little bit. Maybe, Denison, you can give us your impressions. How did all of this start? How did we get into this mess?
Well, I think from what we hear that the COVID-19 ground zero was at Wuhan in China, but it then quickly moved on to other parts as people traveled. There have been accusations that WHO and other government officials did not alert sufficiently enough, or while the warnings were given, countries did not take it as seriously in terms of controlling or understanding the nature of this fever or virus. And that, of course, snowballs to not just a health issue, but because of the movement control order or the lockdown that has taken place all over the world, it has snowballed into a real economic crisis that really impacts the informal sector, contract workers, migrant workers. Actually, it affects all of us, but much more the vulnerable sections of our society. And governments, while they have been taking serious action at the health, at the security end, at direct assistance, all countries have been responding. But I think they have seen great casualties in many parts of the world, the total number. But the real, real impact on the economy and movement, I think is seen like never before. And it really requires leadership and intervention, and it requires really grassroots movement. I'm here at a very much more macro level rather than mentioning any country specific, and it's impacted all of us in that way.
Thanks, Denison. Thanks, Denison. I think that's a very insightful and important overview. And I'll come back to one or two of the things you've mentioned in a minute. But I'd like to hand over to Jason for your input on the same question and your reaction to what Denison has just said, maybe.
Well, I think today in a globalized world, there are many common aspects that we're all living, and certainly this this pandemic is showing that there are that such forms of crisis are today so much more generalized and less focused on a single region or country. So this allows us to think in a much larger way. Speaking about Europe, in the last 3-4 months, it has been the epicenter of the crisis, with almost 2 million cases that are been measured and more than 150,000 people who have died. And Italy is certainly one of the countries most affected. How did we get here? Well, I think we need to look at what have the public policies and our economic system been in the last years. When I'm talking about last years, I'm going back 30 years maybe, but certainly there's been an acceleration in the last 10 years. Austerity measures and structural adjustment have really demolished a good part of the welfare state that we had here in Europe. And countries like Greece, Italy, Spain have undergone the rapid privatization of public services and provision in name of market efficiency. And one of the most evident effects of this is that our health system, our public health system, has been really reduced in its capacity to respond to the needs of the population. And of course, we can see this in a very evident way today, when we don't have the infrastructure and the capacity to react as we could, and we had just some years ago.
Thanks. I think you both made some very important points there. First of all, Denison, you set the global picture of how COVID appeared and spread so incredibly rapidly, and the failure to react and the way countries have been reacting. And Jason, you have given us some insight into the economic analysis. Denison also mentioned the fact of the economic impacts. Now, the whole globalized system today is really falling apart before our eyes. I listened to some forecasts yesterday in another webinar, and the expected contraction of the global economy, that is the visible neoliberal economy, is expected to be about 6%. Now, what we have seen in some sectors is an up to 300% increase in relocalized economy of different kinds, particularly in the food sector. So I'd like you to maybe compare and contrast the falling apart on one hand and the rising up on the other. Denison, could you maybe give me some insights into how you feel about that, going from the macro to the more local and micro economy?
Thank you, Bridget. I think if one looked at Asia, we are about 53 countries, and the capacity of each country differs. But if I took some of the examples of ASEC members who shared with us, like for example, in Thailand and Bangkok, our partners, the HomeNet, works with the informal sector, and they were able to respond immediately, on one hand, to address immediate needs. And one of their innovations was community central kitchen that the informal sector actually put on to assist. But they went on further in terms of advocacy to get the government to respond to the informal sector through social security, cash handouts, aspects that they were highlighting in the past. So what's happening is, because the country is sort of restricted, they are then forced to work with the local economy at the ground level. So if I took the example of India as well, what our partners SSE told us, which is in South India, that their rural dairy milk producers and the agricultural producers were still able to send their stuff to the city, but in some ways reduced, like the milk, but their factories had to address it. In the Philippines, they came up with, of course, they handed distributed fish and so forth. So the solidarity experience came up, but they set up this mobile sort of store called Kadeva, which is a partnership with the agricultural department, with the civil society, ASAC, with private sector. And I think Dr. Ben and Andy, who are part of it, online delivery sort of thing is there. So what I'm seeking to illustrate is that while we were all lost in this sort of global economy and totally reliant on the global food chains and so forth, end of the day in a crisis like this, we totally are reliant on our neighbors and the local community, and the communities that have good solidarity team, a society, a residents association, a community like farmers and consumers, then they have the infrastructure to carry on at that level. If not, they are totally left to the mercy. In Asia, the capacity of welfare assistance or unemployment benefits, most countries are giving some cash out, like Malaysia has given out and provisions, but it's still a handout method. And it is totally dependent on the state, especially in the urban high-rise flats and things like that. So the emergence of alternative community resilience and solidarity is something that we are seeing, and people have begun to value that, plus this online sort of our community now at the global level being able to put together. Those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and they're very insightful thoughts. What I find is, listening to the news and studying the global situation, that in many countries such as India, those who are daily wage workers, and this is also true in the United States, perhaps less so in Europe, are the first people to lose their salaries, and therefore have the issue of how to pay for the basic necessities of life, like their rent, like their food, and so on. Now, there are so many inventive solutions coming out of the community. I read about, in Vietnam, an ATM machine that is dispensing rice to those people with no means who are suffering from lack of salary and COVID. And a counterexample in India is a friend of mine who has a field of 15,000 cabbages, has nobody to help him and cannot get them to market, and the same with his tomatoes. But the issue, the question of the local community is really the critical one. I'd like to turn to Jason for some quick thoughts on this question of the local solutions and relocalization.
Jason, we can't hear Jason.
Jason, are you muted? We can't hear you.
Sorry.
That's it, that's better. Yep, that's fine.
I was saying that everybody now is talking about relocalization, both in the corporate world and in the solidarity economy and alternative or transformative economies world. this could be good, but we have to be really careful. I think it's an important moment because now people are more conscious and more available to, they're experiencing how new lifestyle could take place. They're experiencing a care economy and many solidarity initiatives that have spontaneously emerged beyond the organized ones. And I think this is certainly a good aspect. But on the other side, I think that the discourse that will come out in a few weeks or when things will start normalizing is that we will be redirected toward consumerism and the usual unsustainable production models. And we really need to counteract this push. In these days, we have been assisting to the government decrees restricting the possibility for small local producers and distribution mechanisms to happen, favoring the basic supplies through large scale distribution. And this has put our experiences of small organized distribution in difficulty. But at the same time, it's reinforcing it because we're finding different solutions. We're coming together to put technology at the service of solidarity economy, for instance. We're looking at different models and exchanging competences and ideas. We're mapping all the different initiatives that are happening all over. The different forms of democratic, decentralized, cooperative, renewable energy production, the forms of mutualistic ethical finance that can support forms of productive and reproductive economy. I think this is the moment where we have to rebalance the relation in our economic systems between the productive and the reproductive, between the consumption economy and the care economy. And I think these messages are coming out all over. A lot of the solidarity economy groups are writing manifestos or thinking about what the world could be in the post-COVID crisis, which will continually be a world in crisis, and it's one crisis on top of the other. Let's not forget the enormous ecological crisis we're in, which is not just the climate crisis, it's the loss of biodiversity, it's the loss of ecosystems, and we need an economy that is not only compatible or sustainable, we need an economy that works and is made to be part of our Earth ecosystem.
Thanks a lot, Jason. I think everywhere around the world, what you've said is happening. People are trying to analyze very quickly what is going on around them, trying to map it, trying to see how it can be made more sustainable and endure after this crisis. I think there's also the risk of withdrawing into a more populist kind of approach that we need to avoid. We need to also link this to the broader crisis and not just ramp up all the fossil fuel energies once the lockdown is ended, which is what people are heading towards in some countries today. And we need to look at the humanitarian aspect of how we can not leave people behind. Doris mentioned in the chat how indigenous communities are getting starved because they don't have any access to their habitual foods in terms of protein supplies. So all of these are things that our networks are all collectively working on. And there's this incredible spurt of webinars all over the place to try and talk about this collectively, which is an amazing use of technologies. Now, we finished the time allotted for this conversation. I'd like you to keep thinking, Denison and Jason, about these aspects so that at the end of our hour, you can come back with your thoughts on everything, please. And I'd like to turn to Eri Trinarini, who is in Indonesia. And Eri, you've prepared a little presentation for us, I think, on some of your thoughts. And you're then going to introduce a grassroots champion.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Judith. My name is Eri. I come from the Dinas Swadaya Foundations, and together with me is Mr. Wahyudi Anggoro Hadi. He is the village initiative, he head of the village, and will share with you about the village initiative to respond to the pandemic. And then, so the Indonesians now has in the status of the national disaster. Can you move it? Okay. Can you move it forward, the slides? Okay, I will directly to the third slides. This is the challenges. This is the challenges. In Indonesia, just to give you an illustrations, we are the fourth dense populations. 50% of the populations are living in the Java Islands. So it is quite a challenge. How can we practice the social distancing in the dense populations islands? And the challenge as well, another challenge I want to share with you, that the insufficient health system, the low awareness of hygiene behavior of the most populations, as well the insufficient provisions on water and drinkable water is part of the challenge to combat or to challenge to overcome the virus corona. But a special challenge I want to raise here, that in May and June it will be the Ramadan time and will be end with the Eid. It is a common for Indonesia. They will going back to the kampung, to the village, and celebrate this family. So this is as well a big challenge for the government. How can we suggest the people not going home and instead of staying at home? The another challenges that we acknowledge that I'm in the third slides, still in the third slides. So we that the 99 enterprises in Indonesia are in the micro level. So they are the mostly fragile regarding the social distancing. And only 1% of the enterprises is in the large scale. So without the pandemic itself, that Indonesia actually facing the problems in economic equality. And the last challenge that we want to raise here is that the food and agriculture product is produced in the village. Now with the lockdown, we have the problem in the supply chains. I will let you, Mr. Wahyudi, to explain how can the initiative of the village in the Panggung Harjo to cope with these supply chains problems. Now I will become to in the fourth slides. This is about the woman. Actually, certain problems raised as well by the National Commissions on the Women. One that I want to raise here, that work from home actually bring more work as well for the mothers. They have to accompany the children in doing online service, online learning and cooking and working at the same time. In another side, that the husband has lost jobs. So these situations, these lockdown situations has raised as well the potential to increase the violence. So some recommendations has as well given by the commissions. Among other is affirmative actions among all the activities or support of the governments. Besides the challenge, we see as well the potential. This is interesting. So actually that we realize that herbs and spices is a home in Indonesia, and this is good for healthiness and improve the immune. So in that time that the demand for ginger is increased, this is good for the farmers and for the local economy. And in another side, we found as well that the gotong royong or social working together is as well remain existed in Indonesia, particularly in the disaster situations. A lot of solidarity activity initiative as raised by the Denison, it's happened to Indonesia. And as well the CSO role, faith-based organizations like the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah play an important role in supporting the government in the solidarity to raise the solidarity actions. And then in the six slides, I want to raise how about the SSE enterprise, the social enterprise. So the social enterprise like the Bina Swadaya, we were as well hit by this crisis. Yeah. So we have to run the contingency plan, but we put the people as the priority. But we don't know how long it will go run with this, because the business is going slowly, and the economic relaxations as promised by the government. In fact, there is a problem as well in the implementations. So the last but not least, the challenge. We found that the pandemic has given us the lesson. This is the last slides, Gabriel, the last slides. I jump to the last slides. That the pandemic has given us the lesson. At the first, that actually the village is the root for sustainable development. We are most depending on the village situations. Therefore, the development should be measured by village welfare and equality. So we thought that the village revitalization program, as suggested, initiated by the Bina Swadaya, could be as well the answer. Village revitalizations is a concept where we promote the empowering of local community, village economy by strengthening the self-help groups and cooperative. So another lesson learned that we have should continuously to support the micro enterprises to be in the modality, and as well the capital and awareness raising for the hygiene behavior. The last is that the pandemic as well the chance to strengthen the local economic as well raised by the Denison. So this is my share. I hope that the Mr. Wahyudi Anggoro can more sharing specifically what happened in the village initiative. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you very much, Eri. Unfortunately, there was a little issue with moving the slides. I'm not sure who had the possibility to do it, whether it was you, Eri, or Gabrielle, but it didn't happen. But what we can do is to put your PowerPoint onto the REPES Facebook page or net, so that everybody can gain access to it.
Okay, thank you.
I think there are also some very interesting comments taking place in the chat here. For example, Elizabeth Voss in Berlin says the importance of the feminine perspective, and Eri mentioned the importance of, in lockdown, the increased violence against women. And this is really something that is very difficult to manage, and that to me as a woman is a huge source of worry. Also from Bangladesh, we heard about the garment workers in the chat who have lost all their wages, and many millions of people who are in that situation today. And altogether, this was a really powerful intervention. Now we have one more speaker who is Wahyudi.
Hello.
Hello, where are you? Can we see you on video?
Okay,
there you
I'm
are,
here.
Lovely. Hello.
Hello.
Can you maybe give us your testimony and tell us a little bit about everything there?
Okay, thank you. Let me share my slide, okay? Yes. Yeah. Hello, my name is Wahyudi, the head of village and of Panggularjo. Will be happy to tell you about how the village respond to the COVID-19 pandemic based on solidarity and political and social capital on. After 2 weeks, the president of the Republic of Indonesia announced the COVID positive case for the first time. The village the village government with the villagers established the task force as the center of control and operation to handle the COVID-19 in Panggung Harjo village. This was called Panggung Tanggap COVID-19. The timeline of COVID-19 handling activity in Panggung Harjo village can be seen in detail from the following presentation diagram. Panggung Tanggap COVID-19 was established in order to prevent, handle, and cope with the COVID-19 pandemic by using a digital database approach, both in planning, managing, monitoring, activity, and accountability, but related to intervention and management of support from the villager in the form of fund, goods, and volunteer support. To carry out the task force of Panggung Tanggap COVID-19, a project management was formed consisting of 1 main coordinator and 9 teams, including the clinical impact mitigation team, social impact mitigation team, and economic impact mitigation team, all of which constitute the main team in the management of task force. The activity of a mitigation team work by using a digital platform for the efficiency and effectiveness of handling the COVID-19. Besides the use of WhatsApp group for controlling information as an important part in mitigating social impact, web applications have been developed to mitigate clinical and economic impact. The first web-based application used to mitigate clinical impact was made a daily health monitoring application to map clinical risk felt by villagers. Villagers confine information related to the presence of absence of perceived clinical symptom, whether there is a history or travel from the central area of pandemic distribution, or whether there is a historic contact with COVID-19 positive sufferers, and the presence of absence of comorbidities, for which the application will respond based on the daily health information. There are 6 response categories that they are grouped into 3 groups: high, medium, and low risk. Based on the categorization, intervention carry out starting from the clinical assistant, clinical monitoring, and clinical education. The second web application was built to mitigate the economic impact from the data submitted by villagers, then divide into 4 effective groups. First is very vulnerable. The second is vulnerable, quite vulnerable, and not vulnerable. For the most vulnerable and vulnerable intervention are carried out to prevent food insecurity by distributing more than 3,000 food aid packages. For those who are vulnerable, intervention is carried out in order to provide new job through the cash for work program, and to meet the needs of vulnerable villagers and to stabilize the market for ensuring the availability of goods and at affordable price, and to increase the value of economic benefit of villagers. Then e-commerce platform called pasardesa.id, village digital marketing platform. The basic value of mitigation activity undertaken by this task force are mitigative, humanitarian, solidarity, economic sharing, and collaboration between ABCGFM, academic, business institution, community, government, financial institution, and media information. I think there are the story of Panggung Harjo, and thank you.
I think that this is a very interesting aspect that you've brought up here. There is also a very helpful aspect to it, but a very controversial aspect from what I can see in the chat. And also from a conversation that I had yesterday with some United Nations representatives, because the whole question of data and who owns the data and the human rights of data protection is a very critical aspect. Now, while I think it's really great to have monitoring at community level of how the COVID is spreading or not spreading, I think we need to be a little bit careful about this. You know, I have very mixed feelings myself. I would like to say that some of the things that have come out of what you have been presenting here are how the community can very quickly develop apps. And I have seen this in many, many countries to connect producers and consumers and maintain vital human rights, such as the right to food and access to that food. And I think that those kinds of digital platforms are something that we will be able to take forward. Now, we have another 20 minutes. So maybe I can ask if some people would like to ask questions. We can take maybe 2 questions, 3 questions. There is a raise your hand function in the participants list. So maybe we can take one from, hello, Miguel, I can see you've just raised your hand. Can you be very short, please, and come in with your question, please?
Well, actually, it's not a rather proposal than question, because you've been talking about immediate responses to the current crisis, but I'm sure that after once the pandemic goes down, every government will face with another huge problem, which is unemployment. And on one hand, it's necessary to prepare for such kind of immediate needs, but we have to prepare for the midterm or long-term project. That means, and actually, I've already written a proposal. So I'm now showing you. So this is a request to include a social. So we can, perhaps in a month or so, we can ask every government in the world to include social and solidarity economy, as part of the economic rebuilding national policy.
Thank you, Miguel. I think it's a very important point, and I will hand that over to our speakers for some remarks at the end, because I think both the question of unemployment and extending the existing policy frameworks that are there in, I think, about 54 different countries or local authority level, and to try to see how we can extend this at global level, taking all of the lessons learned from the micro level back to the macro level. And this again addresses what a member of the Malaysian Parliament who is present wrote in the chat, that we need to see how we can take all of this back up to the macro level afterwards. Do we have maybe one more question before I hand back to the speakers? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, so maybe I will take it in a reverse order from the way we began and go back first to Jason with some of your reflections, and then Denison. Jason, would you like to take a few minutes to give us your reflections on everything that has come out of both the chat and the different elements brought to the table here in this really passionately interesting webinar?
Yes, thanks, Judith, and thank you all. I'm really happy that this dialogue is taking place, and we'll have many more to follow, and we're also following those done by others to be able to contribute and to also learn. from each other. I think what Miguel just said is definitely sort of our central message for the political world at all levels, from the local to the national to the regional level. In our case, it would be the European level or the Asian level today, but of course we're talking about different forms of government. I think, though, given the characteristic of social solidarity economy as a form of citizen engagement, self-organized enterprise and economy, and different forms of informal and formal initiatives that come together and cooperate, we have a lot to do beyond what public policies can do. And this is something that has two aspects to it. On one side, creating a new imaginary that really takes over the idea that there's no alternative to the system we are living in, because now that it is evidently crumbling in front of everybody's eyes, people can start opening their eyes and see that there are already existing alternatives that are much, much better. But on the other hand, I think we need to strengthen our action. I mean, the aspects of huge social insecurity that will come out that is already coming out from the crisis. We will see it in the matter of weeks and months. There's an increase in unemployment and job insecurity, and we don't have adequate social protection for this. But we have communities and societies that can support, mutualize their support, and increase the forms of solidarity economy that help people recreate their jobs. We're living in a world that is more and more precarious. The Uberization and outsourcing of corporate services have created a lot of individual workers that are totally unprotected. Maybe we can change that in forms of mutual protection and rethink how public and social solidarity can work together in this sense. One other element I would like to point out, and it's in part linked to the social control and the use of data that was mentioned before, but it goes much beyond that, is that one of the victims of this situation, beyond the health crisis, the labor crisis, the economic crisis, is democracy. In Europe, we already are living a wave of populism, authoritarianism, institutional racism. For many years, this is growing, but now it has the risk of accelerating a lot. Our Polish member, for instance, was telling us about how in Poland, in 1.5 months of lockdown, people are much more frightened for their future and their health, of course, etc. But the government has started breaking all the rules and taking over the justice system, the parliament, changing the constitution, controlling people's movements. And this is something that potentially could happen in any other nation. So we have to be very careful, because we are at risk of another authoritarian wave, and we need a strong solidarity movement, citizen movement that can counteract, not just politically, but with initiatives that really can respond to the needs of people.
Thanks, Jason. That was really powerful. Dennison, how about you?
Thank you.
How would you like to react to everything that is being said here?
I think I would just focus on 2 points. I think to complement what people have said and also picking on from Jason's. I think my real impression of Wahyudi's desa model or the village model at Yogyakarta, many of us at SSE visited the village and met up with the community in November last year. It actually shows the real struggle in Asia in the political structure between centralization and decentralization. And I think as what Jason highlighted, the political forces want to take control, minimize accountability, and so forth. I think Indonesia took a decentralized approach politically, and this shows the Wahyudi is himself an elected local village leader who then has been given a budget and office to help coordinate it. And so it's a helpful model to see how at the ground level they are taking the initiative and be able to move on. Similar to what I think India has with the Panchayat, the grammar level and so forth. And I think that will be strengthened, and COVID shows that in societies where this is weak, then their support systems are not adequate. Secondly, I think the point that came already, and Judith, you mentioned, because I didn't look at the chat, but you mentioned this importance to parliament and macro policies and so forth. I think this is where it gives us an opportunity to relook at national development policies, that it needs to go back. And what I'm saying is not rocket science or new, that it needs to bring greater balance to economic, social, environment, the sustainability framework. It needs to enhance multi-stakeholder engagement, not just in the superficial level. COVID actually locks out a lot of people, even parliaments at this point. But third, which needs to be done in Asia, is democracy and public accountability. In the Malaysian context, the government introduced an economic stimulus package, but we have the opportunity in the post-COVID to look at the 12th Malaysia plan, which is 2021 to 2025, which is parallel moving with SDGs 2030 agenda, and to see how governments in the reformulation, in addressing unemployment, the informal sector, cannot look at economics in the old form. And hopefully they don't go back to this consumer culture and so forth, and the big players dominate and go back to neoliberal. But I think the ground has to rise, and I think it's an opportunity for social solidarity economy to get into the act at the national stage as well, upscaling our micro initiatives, like you highlighted the community supported agriculture and other sorts of initiatives that could really be scaled up as national interventions, which is built into public policy. Might seem idealistic, but at this point, society might be more open to be refreshed with these policy initiatives. Those are some of my points, Bridget, to Judith, to add on to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dennison. We're coming towards the end of our allocated hour here. I'd just like to very quickly call on Eri for 1 or 2 minutes to see if you have any final thoughts to share with us before I try to summarize some of the incredibly rich input that there's been. Eri?
Yes, thank you, Judith. The last that I want to underline is that we realize in these pandemic situations where everything is locked down, we see that the resilience from the village is very important. It's very critical to succeed the social distancing. So seeing the village of Panggung Harjo, we see how can this village can be resilient, responding quickly because they have built the village economy. I mean, Mr. Payudi has support the self-help groups, has support the emerging, strengthening the self-help group in the village by building the cooperative. So calling the solidarity among the civil society in the village is make them easier because he has built this in the system. So again, that the village economy through the revitalizations, village revitalizations is the key according to the Bina Foundation, Bina Swadaya concept. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you so much, Eri. I think that those were excellent closing thoughts. I'd like to just take a few minutes to try and summarize where this webinar has taken us and on this amazing journey we've had together in the last hour. We've covered from the macro vision of the neoliberal globalized world that we all lived in until a few weeks ago, and taking it into today's situation, which is one where everything has become dislocated, locked down, distanced, and disrupted. In many cases, this disruption has led to very, very severe mass unemployment and extreme distress, even death that is caused by this disruption rather than COVID. We have seen also how the real response has been at local level, and I think the other webinars will probably highlight this as well, both in terms of health, in terms of monitoring, in terms of rebuilding a localized functional system that is based on a localized economy of social solidarity, cooperatives, and putting people at the center rather than profit for shareholders. What we have also heard about is the need for legislative framework to take the solutions into account, empowering local communities to a greater extent, and building stronger social solidarity economy frameworks, not just at local and regional level, but also at national and international level. I think this has got to be part of our exit strategy. I agree with what you said, Denison, that we can very usefully argue and link this to the SDGs. I also think that in financial terms, Miguel's remark on linking local currencies to part of the exit strategy is going to prove important because there are going to be not just economic shocks, but financial shocks that result from all of this. And I would like to end with one other thought, which is everybody at global level is talking about social distancing. What we need to talk about really is physical distancing and social solidarity. Because solidarity economy is about social solidarity, and that is a contradiction with social distancing. So maybe we can change the language and talk about physical distancing and social and solidarity economy and coming together. So it's been a real pleasure and an honor to moderate all of this webinar, and all of the elements will be shared by Gabrielle, both the link to the streaming that has been recorded, so everybody can continue to share it with their own networks, and also the PowerPoints will be shared so that you can share them in your respective networks. And I really would like to thank everybody, particularly Denison, Jason, Eri, and Wayudi for their interventions. I'd like to thank Gabrielle, Laure, and Davide for their technical assistance behind the scenes. And I wish you all a very good weekend because it is Friday. So I look forward to seeing you soon in some of the other webinars. We have got a French one planned for next week, which will be a dialogue between West Africa, Mali, and Quebec in Canada. There will also be a Spanish webinar that is being organized. And finally, we are organizing a thematic webinar on COVID and the right to food. So maybe some of you will join us for that because some of your examples, in fact, many of your examples focus on this very key aspect that is the right to food. So thank you very much, and I wish you all goodbye.
Thank you, Judith, for good moderation and some points.
Judith, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay healthy, keep healthy,
Thank you.
and happy.
Hi, everybody.
Bye-bye,
Stay
everyone.
healthy. Bye-bye.
Yeah, stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, David.
Bye.
Bye.
Pak Bambang.
There is Pak Bambang, yeah. I don't know who's still here.
Ben, how are you, Ben? I thought you might intervene.
No, I was not.
Pak Bambang. Oh, Pak Bambang is mute.
There was no time.
Oh, okay. Shah, nice to see you, Shah, from Bangladesh. Ah, how are you? Prof. Rahman.
You.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Ganesh. Yeah, Ganesh. Pak Wahyudi. Laura.
Well
Hello,
done.
Mr. Denison. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thanks. Stay
Thanks.
healthy. Wish you best. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.